We're going to bring in Andrew. Pronouns are he, him in England. Andrew, you are live on the line. Tell us what's going on.
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Doing
Good,
all right.
thanks. How are you, Andrew?
I'm good. I was wondering, how do we get to a place where lots of angry people on the other side to you guys, and then you guys, where everyone gets on and everything's fine and happy?
That's a good and complicated question, I guess. I mean, my simple answer to that would be, if everyone just gave up trying to ruin our lives, then everyone would be happy, because nothing that I want for trans people, or not just me, I'm not the spokesman for trans, or the spokeswoman for trans people, nothing that I see the wider trans community asking for affects cis people at all. So if people stopped making it their hobby to be horrified by fear-mongering rubbish about trans people and stop trying to ruin our lives, then they could do something else, and then we could just live, and then everyone would be happy. But I guess that's
I respect what you just said, but sorry, I thought I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just
that's all right.
That's what I get from sort of the very far edge of the gender critical, when they say nothing that we do is in any way affecting other people. And we know that, for example, I mean, one example, let's just go with Leah Thomas.
Do gender critical people say that? Sorry, wait. Do you think gender critical people genuinely believe nothing they want affects trans people?
I think
because that's like delusional, isn't it?
Well, I'm talking about
that's like straight up delusional. Yeah,
but I'm saying
I mean that's not. Sorry, Andrew. I just because I don't want to like make this seem like it's two sides of a balanced scale. I mean, when I say like what I want doesn't affect cis people, I could say, for example, I don't want to be banned from using the toilet at work, and I can say, statistically, no country in the world that has trans women allowed to use the women's toilets at work has any issue, like statistically, in terms of the data with trans women using women's toilets. Whereas them banning me from the toilet, like, factually would be an issue for me and every other trans woman in the country. And what I want doesn't actually affect any of the gender criticals, because they've already been using the toilets alongside trans women their entire lives, or their wives have in the majority of gender criticals cases. But what they want does actually, I mean, does directly affect me. So if they said, well, we're the same as you, but on the other side, I would say, well, that is, unarguably wrong. Like, surely you agree.
Okay, I respect that, and I'm not saying that I agree with those people. I'm saying they're the extremes of the gender critical side. But what I'm saying is that when you say things like, "Oh, we don't affect people at all," that seems just as far the other way. Because just an example, like I was trying to say, is Leah Thomas. Is that her name? Leah Thomas. Yeah, is that it? Yeah, I'm her name wrong. So. Yeah, I mean, obviously
Leah Thomas
that is. Yeah. So that is like a 6'6", broad-shouldered person that many people would say is a man, who is just winning by laps and laps and laps of a swimming pool.
Well, that's not true, though, is it?
Women...
That's not true, though, is it? She won one competition, or maybe a couple, but she's also not won many competitions. So
she's also
it's not like
every time she does...
she's not. It's not like it's true. It's completely untrue to say that every time Leah Thomas shows up to a competition, she is dominating the competition and taking spots away from women. That is just factually untrue.
So she has won some of them by laps and laps. If you look at individuals,
if we
I'm not saying it's
steelman
the most important thing ever, by the way.
Yeah.
Sure.
If we just like steelman your position on sport, rather than like going into the weeds about Leah Thomas, if we just say like, if we were to have a situation where trans women were dominating one or all or some women's sports, then that would affect cis women. Like, I could agree that whether we think that that's a good thing, a bad thing, or neutral, it would affect some people, because previously you were coming first, or if you were to ban all trans women, then you would have been coming first, and now you'll come in second, seventh, whatever. I guess my main point about sports that I think is the first thing we should always discuss is, statistically, trans women are underperforming at every single sport at the top level. I mean, we can talk about top level sports if we like, at Actually, maybe that isn't the most important thing. I think the most important thing is, I don't know if you saw the start of the show, we were talking about parkrun in the UK, which I hope you've heard of because I think you're from England. If
Yeah.
the majority of sports, like 99.9% of sports, are not top level swimming, Olympic weightlifting, whatever. Even if I was to say, okay, I will just accept your point that trans women dominating every single Olympic sport is happening and it's bad, that would still be affecting the Olympic level athletes. For sure, there's stages up to Olympics. You don't just go from nothing to Olympics. There's all the competitions on the way getting up there. But even then, this is the minority of people who do sports at a competitive level, which is the minority of people. I don't want to say, oh, it doesn't affect many people, so it doesn't count, because that's a garbage position. But I think it is worth, because you were saying, oh, it's not necessarily the most important thing. But I think, really, what about trans women at elite level sports is the best example of where what some trans people want does actually affect cis people. Because me using the toilet at work doesn't affect any cis women. Me having access to healthcare doesn't affect any cis women. Conversion therapy being banned doesn't affect any cis women. Not in a real way, not in a other than being offended or upset kind of way. In a negatively affecting their life in a measurable way kind of sense. But elite level sports does affect elite level athletes. I was going to say sportists then. And I guess that's why my position on sport isn't just some kind of blanket inclusion. I mean,
yeah,
we've talked about it on this show quite a lot before. The only in sport, you have to accept some premises, and on some is that it's just unfair, and we just have to make arbitrary categories. And however we construct the rules, some people are going to have some kind of unfair advantage that fits exactly within the rules. And as soon as you change the rules, maybe they're suddenly shifted out the category, or it's slightly beneficial for someone else in a general sense. And that is inevitable for all sports and all competition. And if we were to come to the conclusion based on data and no irrational prejudice at all that we had to ban all trans women, I think the idea of banning all trans women is pretty ridiculous, considering some transition before puberty. But if we were to come to the conclusion as a society, oh, we should ban trans women from top level golf because everyone who transitions after 16 has an unfair advantage at knocking a ball in a hole or something, that would just be the position I accept, because I think that once we've accepted...
Can I just make the point, Katie? Can I just say, because all I was saying, and I think because you're used to defending yourself against people who are maybe a lot more extreme than I am, or whatever. All I was saying is that my issue is people on both sides making blanket statements we don't affect cis people at all. And what I've just heard you say is a very roundabout and long way of just agreeing with me that, well, actually, there is a case with just sports, for one example, where it does affect some cis people. So I think that the language on both sides of this debate is part of the problem. And I understand, because you've had to defend yourself for so long, it must be a natural inclination to have to push back very strongly. But of course, there are some parts where if we accept trans ideology, what I call it, and the ideology that maybe you wouldn't call it that, then we have to accept that there are some rights, even if they seem small to you, that are going to be taken away.
So I've kind of got three things to this. One is I don't actually accept that trans women are affecting cis people's sports, because I think we're underperforming everything. In a world where we had, in a world where, an imaginary world, in another universe where trans women and cis women were identical on average, some trans women would win sports. And so just some trans women winning isn't itself evidence of it being unfair or some people being pushed out, unless you were to consider the class of cis women to be inherently superior. We could potentially find evidence showing that trans women do have an unfair advantage or are unfairly disadvantaging cis women. And if we do that, then to my next point, nothing I want does affect cis people, because I don't want a situation where theoretically trans women or trans men are pushing cis people out of sports by some kind of biological advantage, because that isn't what I want. One of my premises for sporting thing is we have to come up with some arbitrary rules on fairness, and fairness is always going to be arbitrary, but as long as the irrational prejudice is completely eradicated from the discussion on who's allowed to compete in what sport, then whatever kind of set of rules we come up with, I'm going to have to accept. I mean, I'm not an expert on sport ruling and stuff, but then just like on the then the sort of further point, the third section to this is, I really do think that sports is, I mean, I don't want to say a non-issue because I'm not a sports person, and some people, sports is the most important thing in their life. But when I'm talking about trans rights, like trans people in this country, in the country you live in, generally don't have access to healthcare. Like, we experience discrimination across the board. 25% of people, trans people in the UK, have been homeless at one point in their life. Over 50% of trans women, including me, have been sexually assaulted at some point in their life. And like, that is important stuff that we can make better without affecting cis people. And then someone's like, what about the sporting race in the swimming in America at college in 2022? I'm like, right, yeah, we can have an argument about sporting fairness, but I honestly don't give a fuck about Leah Thomas winning sport. I mean, like, I do in a general sense. I generally care about fairness, but there is.
I get that, I respect what you're saying as well about.
There's nothing else. There's nothing else.
I respect what you're saying about healthcare, and they were more important. And you're absolutely right about that. As far as I'm concerned, why can't we do both? You know, I'm thinking, okay, well, let's make sure trans people are okay, and all of that stuff. Anyway, sports. I don't want to keep you on sports because sports is a bit boring, and you know, what I am interested in from both of you. No, I love sports actually, but the sports debate is a little bit boring of the whole thing. What I'm interested in is just curiously, what, and I don't mean it in a Matt Walsh way. Oh, one is a woman. Because I think I'm not very like him, but I think I am interested from both of you. What is it that you believe makes you, in the simplest sort of way? What makes you? Help me understand what makes you women.
I don't really care about ontological categorizations of people and trying to work out what their true form or true definitions are. Like, I've mentioned this a few times on this show. The only reasons why I care about labels are two things, and this applies to women and straight and British and, you know, all these other descriptions that we can come up with. I only care for two reasons. One is if we're making friends and we're at the pub and you're like, oh, don't you know, I'm this thing, you know, like I'm a man and I'm called Andrew and I'm straight or gay or whatever. Then on a personal level, that's interesting. That's cool. It's a way of describing yourself. Describing people is what we do for conversation. But that's like, I only care if we're making friends. My other reason to care, and the main reason I'm interested in, is for having words to describe and organize around for combating injustice. So we know that the world isn't fair, and some things are not fair for completely random, uncontrollable reasons, but there are some very obvious patterns we can see, like racism and sexism, where people are at a disadvantage for literally no rational reason, caused by humans, and it is unjust. And I want to make the world free of this bullshit where people's lives are just worse for some random aspect of their birth. And we could just get rid of all the words for all descriptions, and it'd be like impossible to talk about these things. So instead, we have words to describe these things. So when I'm talking about, for example, transphobia, I would say trans people experience systematic oppression. For example, in the UK, another number to throw at you, 41% of employers said they wouldn't hire a trans person, like admitted in some poll once.
Well, that's terrible.
And we can argue. I am getting there. Hang on. I am getting there. So we can have an argument about who is a real trans person or not. Like, that is a thing. There is a grey area. There is room to have this discussion. But in general, like, we can say, what about this person? Is Arden really a trans woman, or is she a fake? And like, you know, I can argue one side or the other, but she's my friend. But if we pick another random person, it doesn't really matter to me particularly. What matters is we're trying to combat transphobia. And the same here is the word woman has use when just trying to describe yourself to someone. And if someone was like, talking to someone on Messenger and they didn't know what my name was or something, and they just wanted some information about me quickly, that would be the best way of communicating that information on a personal level. Or the more important part, which is combating systematic injustice, trans women, regardless of whether you think they're really men or women or aliens or whatever, do experience misogynistic sexism, both in the kind of personal way, but also in a like society-wide kind of way. And that is why when I am talking about ending misogynistic sexual assault and violence against women and girls and stuff, I mean, it inevitably includes trans women, whether I think they're women or not. And they're my only uses for the term. And otherwise, I didn't really get, like, if you deep down in your heart believe that the ontological category of women only includes people with XX chromosomes, like, I'll argue about that because I like arguing and because I like biology and it's wrong.
Can I
also,
just interject?
I don't care.
This I got cookies person seems to hate me. I'm being quite polite and open, aren't I?
Oh, you're talking about in the chat? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know how you were. I know you were in chat participating for a while before you got on, and people seemed to be frustrated with your participation in chat. So you may have said or done something.
Get me in the chat. I was just saying, get me in. I wasn't saying anything about any kind of debate. Can you tell me, because Katy, well, that was a bit of a Jordan Peterson word salad 5-minute postmodernist.
That was a good answer. What are you on about?
Why do you think that? Because you said it. What makes you a woman?
Well, explain why my answer wasn't good.
No, hold on. I think for me, it's not too different from what Katy is saying, but the direction I would take it is that it's no different from how you, Andrew, know you're a man. You could say, well, but I'm an adult human male, and that's how I know. And I'm going to say, okay, really? Well, what is a male? Let's get into that.
Okay,
you might say,
I can answer that.
Hold on. Let me talk.
No, okay, sorry.
I'll let you go. But you're asking me a question, so I'm going to answer. So if I ask, how do you know you're a male, and you go, you can have your chance to answer. But what I'm going to say is, if you say something along the lines of, oh, well, I'm an adult human male. We say, okay, how do you know that? And you say, well, I've got a dick. Okay, well, that's clearly not sufficient because trans men can have dicks. And you say, okay, so it's because I have chromosomes, XY chromosomes. And I can say, really? You've seen your chromosomes? And you go, no, but it's a really high likelihood. And I go, okay, so you don't know for sure your chromosomes, but you have a suspicion, which is probably accurate, but it's not something you know for sure. So you say, okay, well, we'll take it back. It's going to be that I have small mobile gametes. Okay, well, some cis men are castrated or for whatever reason don't produce. Maybe they're intersex. They don't produce sperm. So clearly those definitions aren't sufficient, right? So what has actually happened is that you were raised in a society that gave you pretty clear indications of what men and women were socially, and you knew that for you, there was no discrepancy between your body and the social role that you felt you fit. Gender identity is a well-established construct. We know it exists. There are predictive models that we can make around the concept of a gender identity. And for me, my gender identity happened to be in conflict with my sex assigned at birth. And that is the direction that I would probably take that, but...
What I'm intrigued by, and I think that's a good answer as well, and I think it's an intriguing philosophical concept, how do we know that anything's real, if anything's anything, and how do I even know my chromosomes and all stuff like that. I think
that's not quite the point.
I wasn't giving you solipsism. That's definitely not what I said, but go on.
Fine. But I'm trying, otherwise we'll just talk for it. I think I do get what you're saying, and of course I don't get all the intricacies. I never will. I'm not smart enough to always get it exactly as you say. But what I do want to know, though, I'm just intrigued. What is it that made you go, okay? Because I don't associate any social aspects to being man or woman, but it sounds like you guys do. If that's right.
Wait.
And by the way, I say guys because I say guys.
I am unconvinced.
Okay.
I'm not bothered by you saying you guys. I'm more bothered by you suggesting that you don't have any social association with being a man. That is so obviously not true. Are you actually going to try to make the argument here that everything about being a man for you is biological? Because that's the alternative, right?
Well, I suppose you know what it is. It's just as you guys have what I would call an ideology.
Do you have,
I have my own ideology, and I suppose my ideology was initially, it did correspond with the sort of Judith Butler thing back in the day, but she seems to have just flipped completely, of this idea of like, if I have a daughter, my daughter can do anything that has stereotypically been associated with men and not have to sort of change body and that kind of thing.
Judith Butler still holds to that.
As you suggest. Last point.
That's like the core transparent position.
If it has nothing to do with sex, as you seem to be suggesting, it's more about like a social thing.
I didn't say nothing. I didn't say nothing.
That's a straw man.
I'm saying if you can answer it. You can answer it. My understanding, which now I'm realizing is wrong. Okay, but is that it's about a social thing? It's not about sex. So why is it important to change? Why do trans people like to or look to change genitalia?
Because it improves your quality of life, and there's lots of evidence to suggest that.
Yeah, I think if you had an unfortunate penis accident, Andrew, which I hope you never have, and the surgeon was like, by the way, we can just rebuild it, then you'd probably be like, yep, that sounds good to me. I mean, or they could be like, instead, Andrew, we could build you a vagina. Like you're just in a position where you've been like, you've had a thing and it's been a bad time, and you now have the opportunity to pick either one. You'll pick a penis. I think. I assume.
I don't think I'd mind the vagina. I think I like the idea of a vagina, but I'd want to be able to go back to the penis eventually in case I regret it. I don't really mind that much. I don't put that much stock into it. But some people do on both sides
it does
of this.
affect some things. I mean, I don't put that much. It made my life better, but it's not like I talk about it all the time. I don't need to talk about it. It doesn't come into my life much apart from in sexy time. But, sometimes. And also sweating.
Yeah, mine, and weeing, having a wee. So what are some of the aspects that felt womanly to you?
I feel like you're trying to put a position on us that we don't hold, which is the idea that being a woman is just like some purely social made-up thing. I think maybe taking it a step back onto this kind of definition thing, like you wanted maybe a more straightforward answer that wasn't like the best way to describe it. I mean, when you ask someone what something is, like if you encounter a new concept, the way they describe it to you isn't some kind of philosophical first principles thing like they do in maths. Like if you want to know what a shape is in maths, they can tell you the exact definition from like geometric first principles what a square is. Like we can always describe what a square is very easily from the ground up, and it encompasses all squares without exception, and that includes no non-squares without exception, because you can give very precise, clear definitions in maths, and you can't really do that in real life. And the example that you might have seen people using on Twitter, but a classic example is people saying, can you define a chair? And if we had a chair call-in show instead of a trans call-in one, and you called in, you're like, Katie, what's a chair? And I gave you some Jordan Peterson answer, I could instead say, it's something you sit on. And then that is a way of describing it to you. If you genuinely didn't know what a chair was before that, you'd be like, oh, it's a thing you sit on, like the thing you're sat on now. And I'd be like, yeah, and like the thing you're sat on now. And you'd be like, now you have information, your brain's creating this model. But you'd be like, hang on, this person over here is sat on a horse. Is that a chair? And I'd be like, well, no, because it's not an exact definition. Like it's generally it's man-made. And then someone would be like, oh, what about this chair? It's like grown out of a tree. Or what about this? It's a rock that everyone would call a chair. Or like, what about this thing that someone's made and they call a chair, but it's too small to sit on because it's actually a model or something. And like, we can have all these arguing about the corner cases, but we're just generally communicating the thing. So if you said like, if you were an alien and you're like, what's a woman? I'd be like, well, it's a human, and it's like the one that usually has boobs and no penis. That's like the key defining features that we see from a distance. And I like that. That's a good enough description. But if you were to say, well, Katie, what about trans women who don't have boobs and they do have a penis? I'd say, well, some cis women don't have boobs as well, and some cis women don't have vaginas as well. So it's actually a bit more complicated, like the chair thing. And to come up with a strict definition, like with squares, where we include all women and exclude all men, it isn't possible to come up with a definition that actually does that, which includes all cis women.
And it's an intriguing philosophical point, and you're not wrong. But what I want to know,
it's true.
I mean, imagine you weren't talking. Okay, imagine if you weren't talking in front of loads of people, and it wasn't like we've just met in a bar now, I'm a friend of yours for years, and you say, no, now I want to be known as a woman, or I am a woman. I've always been a woman, but I want that to be. What are some? Just give me some traits, or is that? Am I barking up the totally wrong tree here?
What do you mean by some traits? Give you some traits. How would I say to my friends? How did I come out to my friends? Or
I suppose so. And if one of your friends said, "Oh, what is it that makes you believe you're a woman? What is some of the things?"
So I mean, maybe I'm not a good example, but when I came out to my friends, I said, I am having some gender issues, and I would like you to bear with me while I do. And then I said things like, I'm considering changing pronouns, so maybe if you could refer to me as she, her in future. And it just kind of naturally progressed over like more than a year in steps. And I didn't really have I guess with my work colleagues, I came out to them last. It was like, the day before. I never presented as a man ever again. And to those, I said to them, like, I'm going to come into work tomorrow as a woman called Katy, and it would be great if you're cool with that, and if it's not, you can ask me any questions in private or something. But then that was the description thing where I was just like, I needed to send an email to 200 people or whatever. So I just said, tomorrow I'm going to be a woman, and hopefully everyone understands generally what that means, and if they don't, they can ask questions. But it wasn't me trying to communicate some true definition of women and say that I definitely fit into it instantly from this day, and yesterday I fitted into the true definition of man. It was just, it's a description, like saying tomorrow I'm going to come in with brown hair.
Okay, but some of the things I'm looking for here are like, you got long hair now, right? You're wearing lipstick. These are some things that point you out as a woman. And I think that's actually, I don't have by the way, this is a very important point. I respect trans people and the right for trans people to identify like that. It's just, I think there is this issue with like the pie of human rights and things, and people are debating. And I think there's important things to be said on both sides.
I think it's curious, Andrew, how when you asked what our definitions of a woman are, we both conceded that, more or less the definition adult human female is acceptable, but there's problems with thinking that definition is ironclad. And then you wouldn't accept that, and you insist that we must define woman. My womanhood must come from the length of my hair or the makeup on my face. And that's not my position at all. That has never been my position.
I didn't say it must, and you're right that I need to get your position better. I need to understand it better, and I am trying, promise you, and I'll get it wrong because, and I think we all have to show some humility on this side, because I feel that you're getting my side wrong as well. Because I'm not trying to be combative, and I'm not trying to say the only thing is hair and makeup. I'm trying to ask you what the thing. So I agree with you that it's very hard.
Wait, hold on. I need to talk. But my problem is that when we've given you a definition, you seemed to not accept that and go, okay, but what things? Like, you keep goading us because it seems like you're...
You didn't give me a definition. You said
that's a lie. No, Andrew, that's a lie. Andrew, that's a lie. That's a lie, Andrew. Andrew.
Okay, have you had...
I'm going to mute you now because you had an opportunity to stop talking and you chose not to, so you're on mute currently. The audience can't hear you. That's a lie, Andrew. We specifically said that I'm okay with the notion of adult human female being a broad definition, but the problem is that those definitions are insufficient. If you say, I know I'm a man because I'm an adult human male, there's problems with all of those words at every point at how you know those things are true. So it's not true that we didn't give you the definition you were looking for. I actually conceded to the definition that gender criticals use, but pointed out that the way that they use it is problematic and not in concordance with reality. So before you start, asserting that it must be that we identified our womanhood because I wanted to have long hair, that's not true. That's not something I said or have ever said. I also have I have notes on other things that I've had problems with and wanting to respond to what you've said, but we're so far past it now that I don't even think it's worth it. I mean, like, you suggested earlier that we thought there was no correlation between gender identity and sex. That is not something either of us have ever said. In fact, I think we've both, on multiple occasions on this show, pointed out that the vast majority of people, their biological sex is going to correlate with their gender identity. That biology has a significant moderating factor on gender. It is just not exclusive. You are unmuted now, And now you can respond to the things I said.
Katie, what's your cat's name?
She's called Poppy.
See, folks?
Beautiful. I love
This
that.
is when we say that trans
when I
women
say,
experience social misogyny, it's right there. When you directly ask someone to respond to things they say and they totally ignore you. Social
but that
misogyny
can
right
happen,
there.
Arden. And let me just explain something. Firstly, it does appear that Katie is genuinely interested in debating, so that's why it's easier for me to go and talk to Katie. And secondly, there's something important called Hanlon's razor, and I think it might help. I know that sounds patronizing, but when you have debate.
Oh no, I'm muting you again. You're suggesting that I'm not interested in debating you, presumably because I muted you. I know what Hanlon's razor is. I don't think I've at any point attributed malice to you. Misogyny doesn't necessarily conclude that somebody has malice towards women. There are cultural attitudes towards women. So I'm really having a hard time with this call, Andrew, because while you put on these airs of being a honest interlocutor, and so far this conversation has been relatively okay, you also won't accept our answers and insist that our real answers must in fact be something else. So I really have a problem when you say I'm not interested in a debate when you are in fact being dishonest in this conversation. You are unmuted now and you can respond to the things that I said.
Right. Thank you so much. When I talk about Hanlon's razor, it's something that I try never to do. Like I also disagreed with some of your points and things, and I would never come back at you and say like, aha, you're lying. I think that, but what happens?
Lying wouldn't fall under Hanlon's razor. Lying isn't malice. Lying means you're being fucking dishonest.
Well,
Dishonesty isn't malice.
Well, it can be, but it's not always. It's not always, isn't it?
Katie, I think, agrees that dishonesty is malice. Come on.
She literally just said not always.
Malice.
See, this is my problem with you, Andrew. She literally just said the words, it's not always dishonest, and you said you must agree that it's dishonest. Like,
A good example of dishonesty in this context would be a lot of gender critical people will not disagree with or they will say something they don't believe to be true because they know if they disagree with like the hive mind of gender criticals, that they will get disowned and piled on and like shunned from the group. So, I mean, I've had people say in DMs to me they believe one thing and then go straight onto the timeline and say literally the 180 polar opposite. And I'm like, I'll reply to them.
Is that not malice?
No, because they might be, they don't have malicious intent to lie to me. Like, they were lying to me or they were lying to their whole group.
Right.
But I don't think it's malice. It's like out of fear or out of a need to fit in. But also you could, I mean, if your partner says, what do you think of my new hair? Like, you might be like, yeah, I love it, when you don't. Okay, and that's not malice. Like, that could even be love.
That's a pro-social lie. So
malice,
as it happens,
the intention or desire to do evil, ill will. There's nothing about being dishonest in a conversation that is necessarily the intention to do evil. Sometimes you can be so pathologically wrapped up in your own worldview that you are incapable of honestly addressing the words that people have given you. That's why this whole network is based on shows around atheism, because Christians notoriously avoid direct answers about their religious beliefs. Those are examples of dishonesty that isn't malice.
Okay, I get it. What Arden you can't possibly know, I understand this, is I've just written a book about lies, secrets, and deception. I've done, like 400 pages about exactly what a lie is. And it's an act of commission rather than an act of omission. It basically means you have to go in and make the lie. That's what a lie is. Otherwise, you're just talking about people making mistakes. And I think you would have better debates with people. It's just my opinion. Go on.
Do you think lying by omission isn't a thing? Sorry, this is total subject change.
Yeah, I don't think it's a thing. It's an interesting conversation, though. I think you were then talking about the subconscious and unconscious and the ideological capture. Which we all have, by the way. I mean, the idea that I might be, or gender critical people might be, and Christians might be, and you guys aren't, you'd have to be the first people in history to not be in some way affected by ideology or bias, right? I mean, we all...
I would never suggest that we are influenced by bias and ideology. Of course, literally everyone is all the time. In order to be a functioning human in society, you have to use heuristics and make assumptions and snap judgments. That's just existing as a human being in society.
I agree. But look, I just think you shouldn't jump to lying. I promise you, my head is like doing gymnastics, trying to understand. And
Well,
when Katie says, I am getting stuff. I am starting. I'm going, okay, that's what it is. You know, that kind of
Okay,
thing. But
right.
when you jump to lie,
This is a little bit of a
you know,
sidetrack, I guess. I appreciate that obviously you two have a disagreement on this.
yeah, and I'm
but
so not
either
interested in
way,
being tone policed. So
whether it's a lie or it's malicious or not, which we can never really know, because you could also be malicious and lying about lying, etc., etc. But what we can say is that the characterization of my position, and also separately but similarly Arden's position, that it being a woman is some kind of purely gender social construct thing, isn't a correct characterization of our position. In fact, I would go as far to say the idea of sex versus gender is a false dichotomy. And people are often just like, do you think that we should base laws around sex or around gender? Which of those two things do you think? And I mean, neither of those are one-dimensional, neither of those are binary, neither of those are orthogonal. So I think that's important, like, foundations for this conversation. And I think if you come in, like, generally gender criticals have this, hashtag sex not gender, and so they feel like the opposite is hashtag gender not sex, which I am not saying. I don't know anyone who is saying. In fact, if you were to read my most read essay of all time, seeing as you're flexing your book about J.K. Rowling, one of my core points is she says, like, sex is real, and I'm saying sex is real. It's just that she's wrong about it. And sex doesn't... Our sex characteristics affect our lives. Like, me being read as a woman to wider society means I am more at risk of sexual assault, which is, like, very... like, what's the word? I have experienced firsthand the change that
I'm
comes
sorry
with
to hear that,
and the
Casey.
sex character. Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to sort of catfish. No, not catfish. What am I saying? Sympathy fish.
No, I know. Yeah.
But the
No, but
point
fair
is
enough, it's one of them.
and the point is that, this kind of sex not gender thing, I mean, call it sex or call it gender or whatever, the reality is in my life is that my sex characteristics that people can sense have changed, and that's changed how they interact with me. And that's
what I'm
like
trying to work out. Which one? Like, in what respect?
Which sex character? So, like, I guess, sorry if this call's going on a long time, everyone watching it. I'm interested. Arden, if you're sick of it, feel free to pull the plug at any time. But earlier was mentioned makeup and long hair. And I guess this one thing I would, like, highlight on that is, in our Western society, having long hair and wearing makeup are things that generally women do and generally men don't. And they are a way, people do use them to gender or sex people, whichever one you want to describe it as. And it is actually sometimes something that trans women do as, like, a safety thing. Like, if you pass, you are less likely to get harassment. And if you have long hair and you wear makeup, you pass better, because people in the UK and the USA have decided that people with long hair and makeup are more likely to be women. And, like, in their little lizard brain, you get more and more points towards the women's side until you fall into that box securely enough that they don't question it and they just carry on with their lives. And that is one of the reasons why a lot of trans women end up following some kind of gender stereotype. And also, interestingly, why a lot of trans people don't specifically go out their way to avoid these things. But that's another conversation. But when it comes to, the things that have changed in my life, I happen to have had long hair most of my adult life, and since I was like 16, because I'm into heavy metal and I think long hair is the way everyone should be. But in terms of wearing makeup, like, I like the art of makeup and stuff, but also I absolutely like coming on this show. If I come on without makeup and I am, hello, my name's Katy and here I am, I will get more negative comments. The comments will be more focused on my appearance. I will get a lot more abuse for not looking nice, not fitting into some stereotypes. So that is probably the main reason I do makeup on this show, because I've I do the same makeup every time now. People watching are probably bored of it. I change my lipstick up sometimes, but like I can slam it out in 10 minutes, and it's for those reasons. But the things that change in my life, it's not just having long hair and makeup and wearing whatever and doing my nails. Like, hormones change your biology in like really fundamental ways, not just like growing breasts, for example. That is a thing that changes, and that does change how people interact with you. And it changes, your skin texture and the shape of your face and that kind of thing, and makes it so you move towards passing as a woman in society, which means the majority of people who interact with you see you as a woman. And when that starts happening, they start acting towards you like they do to other women, and that includes being misogynistic, and it also includes, other things people do in non-misogynistic ways when they interact with men and women. But also, hormones change all kinds of things, like your risk of certain cancers and the way in which certain diseases present themselves, and even also stuff in sexy time. So there's a lot of things here which have changed, which are like, when people say sex is real and they're gender critical, I'm like, you're like a sex denialist to me. You're like someone who says, I don't care about your sex characteristics at all. None of your material sex characteristics matter to me. All that matters is what genitals you had as a baby, because that's what the hashtag sex not gender ultimately means. And
listen, Katy, I've got to go. Sorry, and okay. You've spoken really eloquently about this. No, but it's really interesting. It was interesting, and I do feel I've learned something. I just want to make a quick point about how we need to talk more. And a lot of the people in the chat I can see are making really, Andrew's a liar, Andrew's this, he's trying to be like that. And I think I've come to understand. And there is a nice comment from Noel Arendt there who says, I honestly love this call. It's fascinating, and Katy's explanations are so clear and wonderful. Arden is great too. So that's a really lovely comment. Now, if one of you came on my channel now, there would also be mostly people having a go at you. But one or two would also say, oh, but it's really nice to see this. And I just think we need a world where we can be honest with each other and even have a go at each other and go, no, I don't agree with you. But then everybody's just like, but we're all human beings. We all love, we all have family, we all, that's all I think.
Yeah, I promise not to go off because I know you have to disappear. I guess just on that, Andrew, I thought that you were the Andrew that we had briefly talked on Twitter and you'd invited me on your show before. And obviously maybe you're invited Arden on too, and I'm not going to answer for her. But I guess there are other factors here. Like, if we were to meet at the pub, I'm sure we could get on and disagree. Like, I love arguing with people. I meet people at the pub all the time which are religious or believe in ghosts and stuff, and I cannot get enough with arguing with people. But the difference here is that trans rights, and I said this at the start, this genuinely affects my life. There is a real chance, maybe less so now, but if you had called like 2 years ago, I felt at the time there was a real chance that the gender critical movement might lobby the government hard enough to change the Equality Act and make it so I'm like banned from the toilet at work or something. And that would ruin my life. Like, if I had to make a choice between risking my safety or risking breaking the law, every single time I needed to go to the toilet, like, it's just the toilet, but it's still such a big deal to me. And it would, whether that passed or not, would never affect any of them. Not a single one of them arguing it. And if I was to come on your show and everyone there was religious and everyone was saying horrible things about me, it would just bounce off me. Doesn't matter at all. Even if I was getting threats and stuff, because I've experienced so much of that, it's every day to me. But none of it affects me. Like, when I die, I'm not going to heaven or hell because they aren't real, because it's a load of bullshit. But trans rights does affect me. So when I come on your show, I not only have to consider mean things that people say, I have to remember that every presentation of a trans person is more than just what is said. It's also the context and the wider framing of it. And are we presenting ourselves as a debate? And if we are presenting ourselves as a debate rather than a certain idea on show, then just the framing alone can do more damage to trans rights than anything said by anyone involved in the whole conversation. So it's very important to consider all of these things and to act responsibly. And that's why I think having a trans rights call-in show is good, because we get to set the tone. And sure, you can say, oh, you just need to do propaganda or whatever. I've gone on other anti-trans shows. No, I'm not saying you, but I'm saying one could say that. And I've gone on gender critical shows before, and there's a lot to consider from the point of view of, is this a net positive for trans people's rights? Because this affects me and it affects my friends. And at the end of the day, you're interested and, you know, obviously you want to grow your channel and blah, 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 blah. And you might be interested on a genuine human level and you might genuinely care for my future. But even so, it just doesn't affect you. So that's why it's complicated. And I'm not saying no, but I do have to think about it.
I respect that.
Anyway,
thank you for explaining.
Thanks for calling in, Andrew.
You're very welcome, and thank you both, and have a lovely evening to you both.
We will, and thanks for calling, and I'm sure we'll argue on Twitter in the future. I'll say some really extreme things.
I look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye. Thanks, Andrew. Bye. Sorry for being cordial when you were frustrated, Arden.
Oh no, I completely blacked out. Once I got tone policed, I do not give a fuck.
Yeah.
These things
Classic.
are serious. They are actually extremely important. So if you dishonestly represent my argument and I point that out and then you tell me you tone policed me, I don't give a fuck.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and I only became a woodworker for the puns. That's not important. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so on our Patreon or as a channel member, and you can actually support specific shows and specific hosts in special tiers on those. Check those options out. Also, you can leave a super thanks and get a little highlighted deal. But if all else fails, you can always you can subscribe and leave a comment. Now, here are some suggestions because I don't care about the algorithm. I am the algorithm. Bye.